She would later learn that the night her life changed had begun like every other night, with fear already awake, but she did not know that yet, did not know that somewhere beyond the dust and the dying light a quiet cowboy was riding toward the house, where pain had trained her how to breathe, because in the small cattle town of Red Willow, fear was not an event but a climate, and it had been her first language, spoken fluently before she ever learned her name, learned instead the sounds that mattered. The scrape of boots across the floorboards, the clink of a bottle set down too hard, the sharp intake of breath that meant anger had chosen its direction, and she had learned, the way children do when survival depends on it, to read those sounds faster than words, to shape herself smaller when the shadows grew, to keep her eyes low and her mouth closed because crying never saved her. It only prolonged the lesson, and so she endured, day after day, belt after belt, word after word that cut deeper than leather, until bruises felt like part of her body and silence felt safer than hope, and the house itself seemed to lean inward, trapping her in its narrow rooms where her father's rage had nowhere to go but into her, not because she had failed, not because she had disobeyed, but because some men wake up already broken and need someone smaller to prove they are still strong. And the town knew this. They all knew, because pain carries. It seeps through thin walls and open windows, and settles into the streets. But Red Willow was the kind of place that survived by not intervening, by calling it family business, by looking away when a child walked past with sleeves pulled too low in summer. And so no one stopped him, not the neighbors, not the men at the saloon, not the women at the pump. And the girl learned that help was a story told to other people, not something that came for her. Until the afternoon the stranger arrived, riding in slow from the western ridge where the land lifted into dry hills and the wind never stopped speaking. A man with a hat pulled low and shoulders shaped by work and solitude. A man whose horse moved like it trusted him completely. And no one paid much attention at first because strangers passed through all the time. But this one did not go straight to the saloon or the store. He stopped, listened, watched. And when the sun dipped low and the town settled into its usual hush, he heard something that did not belong to evening quiet. A sound too sharp, too familiar. A sound that reached back through years and tore open something he had buried beneath dirt and distance. And inside the house the girl knelt by the table, hands swollen from chores done raw, knowing the moment before pain the way animals know storms, her body tightening before her mind could catch up, the whistle of the belt cutting air arriving just before impact, and she braced, because this was how nights worked, because nothing ever changed, except this time. There was a pause, a strange, impossible pause, followed by the sound of boots on the porch, heavy and deliberate, not rushing, not hesitant, and her father's voice snapped toward the door, already angry at the interruption, and the girl did not look up, because looking up was dangerous, because hope was dangerous, because disappointment hurt worse than bruises, but the boots crossed the threshold anyway, and the room shifted, the air itself seeming to pull tight, and the man spoke, not loud, not threatening, but calm in a way that made the anger hesitate, and in that hesitation the girl felt something unfamiliar stir, something she did not have a name for, and the belt lifted again out of habit, out of pride, and the stranger caught it midair, wrist held steady, not cruel, not shaking, just final, and in that moment the girl sensed, without understanding why, that this man was not here to scare, not here to lecture, not here to negotiate, because his voice did not rise when he said the words that would fracture her world open. She's coming with me, and the house seemed to hold its breath, the walls listening, the floorboards remembering every step that had led to this one, and the town outside pretended not to hear, because endings make people uncomfortable. And the girl remained kneeling, heart pounding so hard it hurt, because she had learned that kindness often disguised itself as another test. And when the man knelt in front of her and offered his hand, she stared at it as if it might vanish, as if touching it might make the pain return tenfold, and time stretched thin in that space between fear and possibility, until she felt her fingers move without permission, numb not from cold but from disbelief. And when she placed her hand in his, it was the first choice she had ever been allowed to make, and she did not know yet where he would take her, or why, or what waited beyond the edge of Red Willow. Only that the door behind her closed without a blow for the first time, and somewhere deep in her chest a question formed that felt almost like Treason. What if this is real? And the cowboy stood, still holding her hand, and led her toward a life she had never expected, while the town watched in silence, telling itself it had done nothing wrong. They did not speak as they left the house, because words would have broken whatever fragile thing was holding her together, and the town of Red Willow receded behind them in stages, the porch steps, the dirt road, the last crooked fence, each one feeling unreal, as if she were watching herself from a distance, waiting for someone to shout, to grab her arm, to drag her back into the shape of the life she knew, but no one did. And the quiet cowboy walked beside her with a pace that never hurried and never slowed, as though he understood without being told that fear needs time to keep up with the body. And only when the edge of town disappeared did she realize her hands were shaking so badly she could barely feel his grip, and he loosened it immediately, not offended, not disappointed, just adjusting, because everything about him seemed built around noticing small things, the way her steps faltered on uneven ground, the way her breath came too fast when a voice sounded behind them, the way she flinched when a bird burst from the brush, and the climb toward the hills stretched longer than it looked, her legs burning, her lungs aching. Yet the pain felt different than the pain she knew, because this one had direction, and she could stop when she needed to, and when she did, he stopped too, never pulling, never pushing, just waiting, and in those pauses she studied him in pieces, the dust on his boots worn smooth by miles, the quiet set of his jaw, the eyes that carried a heaviness that did not feel dangerous, only old. And she wondered what kind of man walked into a stranger's house and did not raise his voice. And the higher they climbed, the quieter the world became, until the town noise faded completely, and there was only wind and the soft sound of their footsteps. And she realized she had never been anywhere this quiet before, never been anywhere where silence did not mean waiting for the next blow. And when they reached the cabin, small and weathered and tucked against the slope like it belonged there, she felt the familiar tightening return, the certainty that this was where the trick would reveal itself, where kindness would change its face. But it did not, because the door opened to nothing more than a single room, a table, a fire pit, and a space cleared for rest. And he stepped aside to let her enter first, as if the place were already hers. And inside there was no shouting, no sudden movement, no smell of anger soaked into the walls, only wood smoke and quiet. And he placed food near her without comment and moved away, giving her space the way one gives water to something starved, carefully, without flooding. And she did not eat it first, because hunger had always come with rules. But when she did, no one watched, no one counted, no one punished, and night fell slowly, the kind of night that arrives instead of attacks. And she sat awake long after the fire dimmed, certain that sleep would leave her defenseless, certain that nightmares would drag her back. And when they did, when her breath caught and her body jolted upright, she found him awake, sitting near the fire, not touching her, not asking questions, just present, like a guard who did not need to announce himself. And days followed this pattern, one careful moment after another, and she learned that mornings could arrive without dread, that mistakes did not summon rage, that a raised hand might only mean a pot being set on a hook, and still her body did not trust it, because fear leaves deeper marks than bruises, and she startled at kindness most of all, because kindness always asked for something in return, or so she had been taught. But the cowboy asked for nothing, not gratitude, not obedience, not explanations, and she began to understand that whatever had broken him had taught him patience, and whatever patience had taught him, he was giving freely. And one evening as snow began to creep down from the peaks, and the cabin settled into winter, she finally found the courage to ask why he had stopped, why he had taken her, and he answered, slowly, as if choosing which truths to lay down, telling her that some wounds never close, that some losses hollow you out so completely you either disappear or learn how to protect what remains, and that when he heard the sound of pain that afternoon, he knew he could not walk past it again. And she listened, not fully understanding, but feeling something shift all the same, because for the first time, her survival was not an accident. It was a decision someone had made, and that knowledge settled into her bones like warmth, quiet and steady, promising a life she was only beginning to imagine. Winter finished what fear had started loosening, sealing the cabin in snow and quiet. And in that stillness, the girl learned the shape of a life that did not revolve around bracing herself. Because days passed without punishment and nights arrived without dread. And slowly, so slowly she did not notice at first, her body began to believe what her mind still questioned, that safety could exist without conditions, that rest did not need to be earned through pain, and she moved through the cabin with a caution that softened week by week, no longer counting footsteps behind her, no longer waking with her jaw locked tight. And when the nightmares returned, as they sometimes did, they no longer ruled the night, because she learned how to come back from them, learned that the dark could hold silence instead of threats, and the cowboy remained what he had always been: steady, patient, present, never pushing her toward gratitude or calling himself her savior, never asking her to forget where she came from, because he understood that forgetting was not healing, and healing did not mean erasing the past. It meant surviving it without letting it decide the future. And in small ways she began to claim herself, choosing when to speak, choosing when to sit close to the fire, choosing when to step outside and feel the cold air bite her lungs just to prove she could. And the flinches grew fewer, the fear quieter, until one evening, long after the snow had settled deep against the walls, she sat beside him and asked a question she had been carrying since the day they left Red Willow. Not why he had taken her, but why he had stayed. And he answered without ceremony, without poetry, telling her that grief does not vanish, it only changes shape, and that protecting something fragile had given his loss a direction instead of a weight. And she understood then that rescue had not saved just one of them. It had bound two broken paths into something that could keep moving forward. And that night she slept without dreams again, not because the past was gone, but because it no longer owned her. And when spring eventually came, melting the snow and opening the hills, she stepped outside and watched the light touch the ground with a gentleness she had never known. And she realized that her life would not be easy, that scars do not disappear simply because you are safe. But for the first time, difficulty did not feel like a sentence. It felt like a challenge she was allowed to face on her own terms. And if anyone had asked her then who she belonged to, she would not have pointed to the cabin or the man beside her. She would have said herself, because that was the greatest thing the quiet cowboy had given her. Not escape, not protection alone, but the space to become someone who could stand in the world without fear being the first thing she breathed.